We've already looked at what we've called the road to the revolution, and we've already looked at some of the major causes that led to the actual beginning of the war and separation from Great Britain. What we're going to see today is what actually led to fighting, to the actual shots being fired, to there being bloodshed, and to an all out war being had in the colonies. We know some of the issues, and today we're going to see what all of those issues and all of that unrest eventually led to. The committees of correspondence had already been communicating with one another ever since, really, the Boston Tea Party. Basically, those were just set up so that each colony knew where the other colonies stood when it came to the taxes Great Britain was passing, as well as the way Britain was responding to colonist action. In various colonies and all communities all across um, the 13 colonies, militias begin to form. This is where we get that whole idea of the Minutemen. These are going to be soldiers who could be ready at a minute's notice. Really not well trained soldiers. That's why they're called militias. These are going to be farmers and regular old colonists who are going to be willing to take up arms against the British if they needed to. And after the intolerable acts or the coercive acts that close Boston Harbor, that are going to take away so many civil liberties, the committees of correspondence are going to call for a meeting that's going to meet in Philadelphia. And the very first one happens in 1774. They're going to basically, at this point, just discuss what they believed were the rights that colonists should have. And after they do that, they agree that they will meet again in 1 year to see where things stand with Great Britain. So it's not at this meeting that they really start talking separation. At this point, most of the colonists and most of those who are at the Continental Congress are really more interested in smoothing things over and moving forward with Great Britain with what they believed should be their rights intact. In April of 1775, there was rumor that there were weapons stored in Concord, that the colonists were trying to stockpile weapons in the event that there was going to be a war with Britain. So the British decide that they are going to try to take those weapons out. Before the British can arrive in Concord, Paul Revere, William Dawes, and Samuel Prescott are going to ride ahead of them, warning the colonists on the way. This is that very classic, the British are coming, the British are coming. But it was not just Paul Revere, even though he's the one we remember from our childhood history books. The Minutemen are going to gather and meet the British at Lexington. This is where the first shots were fired. There were colonists killed, shots fired, and this showed what the colonists were willing to do. They're going to conduct guerrilla battle tactics along that road to Concord. So this means that they're not going to be standing up in straight lines like you see the British forces doing here in these pictures on the left. They're going to be hiding in the side of the road, in the bushes, taking out those British as they can, however they could, instead of what the British would have called that dignified fighting style. In May of that same year of 1775, the Second Continental Congress is going to meet. This is the Continental Congress where they call for an army and put George Washington as its leader. They're going to call this the Continental Army or the Continentals. The meeting was still torn at this point. There were some who talked about compromise and working it out with Great Britain, while many others were talking about complete independence. It was at this second meeting. Now, guys, this is not going to be a meeting that's over in a brief period of time, a few days, or even a week. It's going to last for an extended period of time, for weeks and weeks and weeks. And eventually, this meeting, the Second Continental Congress, was where the Declaration of Independence was eventually written. Bunker Hill was going to be important for several reasons. In June of 1775, the colonists had taken a hill that overlooked Boston called Breed's Hill. The colonists were positioned at the top of that hill. The British wound up having to charge that hill 3 times, and the only reason the British were successful was because the colonists eventually ran out of ammunition. There were many, many casualties. In fact, this was the deadliest battle of the war. But what this battle showed was that the colonists were not going to back down, that they were willing to fight and die for their cause, were also willing to kill the British in order to get the rights they believed they deserved. In July of 1775, the Second Continental Congress is going to draft what is called the Olive Branch Petition. The Second Continental Congress is going to send King George, this is him on the right here, a petition that asks for them to return to the peace of the past. But what the colonists didn't know was that at the same time that King George received word and got this olive branch petition, he also received word of the shots being fired at the various battles at Lexington and Concord, as well as Bunker Hill. When he realizes that the colonists are taking up arms against the British, he demands that the rebellion be put down at all cost, and he refuses that petition. So even though this petition was meant to fix the relationship between the British and the colonists, because of other events that had happened, this is not going to work, and this petition was rejected. Common Sense is the name of a very important pamphlet written by Thomas Paine that circulated in the colonies at this point in time. Many colonists were split. There were really a lot who were still loyal to Great Britain. They're going to be called loyalists. And then those who wanted independence from Great Britain, they were called patriots. At this same time, this pamphlet called Common Sense, written by Thomas Paine, that was widely read before and during the war, is going to be urging colonists to separate from Great Britain. It's going to tell them that this was the only thing that made sense. This is key because it was not just the subject matter, it was the fact that it was also written in what we call the vernacular. That means it was written so that all colonists could read and understand what was enclosed in this pamphlet. Very widely read, and it is going to say that the only common sense move was for the colonists to be granted their independence from Great Britain. It made financial sense, social sense, and political sense for that to happen. Many colonists are going to read this. It's the kind of thing that they would read and then pass along to their neighbors, and really got a lot of people to see the whole revolution in a different light and encouraged many of them that independence was the right move to make.